This episode of the Citadel Cafe is brought to you by listeners like you. Visit patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe to find out how you can become a patron and help make this show possible. This is the Citadel Cafe, episode number 327 for Wednesday, July 24th, 2019. My name is Joel Duggan, and the Citadel Cafe is where my friends and I hang out to talk about the geeky stuff that we are into. Joining me this afternoon, Megan Townsend is back, and you can find her at Megan Townsend on all the social media that matters. Hello, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm great. Now that we've had some rain. And yes, I'm breaking the rules, and no, I don't care, because Megan and I were melted into small puddles of ooze over the weekend. And while it is still very muggy, it is nice to not be 40 degrees, because that's just sick humor on the point of Mother Nature. So yeah, it's been a challenge, and I bring this up on purpose because it's hard as a content creator working from home when you're not working in a studio that is like a central climate controlled building to work in conditions like that. Like, I have AC, but I need to turn it off to podcast and stream and record, and like I can't have a large unit next to me vibrating like a semi truck going down the road and do anything. So I've found it quite challenging. I'm also, I don't want to say so much budget conscious, but I also don't, like, I'm the kind of person that doesn't leave lights on if I don't have to. I don't leave stuff going. Like, I turn my television off when I'm not using it. I don't leave it on all the time. The only thing that I think is on all the time is my computer, but it has like a low power mode that it switches to and stuff. But for me, I don't like using more energy than I need to. Unfortunately, I'm also a little bit stubborn, and perhaps a little bit of the artist budget mind seeps in there. And I don't necessarily turn my AC on when I should probably just give in and do it. I might do it later in the day at like 3 o'clock when I probably should have had it on all day, you know?
Yeah.
And so I've found that the last few days, work days specifically, where I've had to do some stuff, have been really draggy, because I didn't really want to give in. So it's just been a lot of open windows and a lot of fans going and stuff like that. But I don't want to dwell on that too much, because I feel like I've certainly, if not this show, then certainly on the Render Distance, the bonus show that sandwiches the spawn chunks that I do, I was ranting about the weather. However, on a cool note, there was one hell of a thunderstorm here on
so neat.
Sunday.
I miss thunderstorms.
It was really cool, and I didn't really see any lightning because I kind of faced the wrong way, and I went to the top of the stairwell and looked out to the harbor, but I mean, like, it was raining so hard and it was so dense that you couldn't see more than like a quarter mile. So if any lightning happened, to me it just appeared like sheet lightning. I didn't really see any kind of like fork lightning or anything super cool. I saw some stuff on social media, but man, it rained hard. It was a real sight. I took some videos and posted it up on Instagram on my stories and stuff, and it was refreshing because it had been so warm, but it was also kind of nice to just like turn everything off. I actually did turn off my computer because my power flickered briefly, and I thought, you know what? I'm just going to save everything that I'm doing. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go watch the rain for 45 minutes because I don't really feel like having all this stuff running and then have the power cut. So yeah,
Which is a smart idea. I mean, like, that's the last thing you need is for everything to just fry itself out.
No, exactly, right. Well, I mean, I've got surge protectors on everything, and what had tipped me off actually is, speaking of the air conditioner, is that the air conditioner shut off, and I was just like, that's weird. Why would the air conditioner shut off? I hope you're not broken, dear friend. You know, and then I went to go look, and the surge protector that I had it plugged into had tripped. And I was like, oh, interesting. Weird that tripped, but nothing else in the apartment did. But it might be just because the air conditioner was using so much power. So I'm not sure what exactly happened, but there was enough of a fluctuation that it tripped the power thing. So I was like, okay, well, I'll take that as a flag, and I'll go save everything. I have had to get used to over the last 2 years working on a desktop, because I had a laptop as my workhorse for like the longest time. And what's awesome
Right.
about those is that, as even if your battery is old and not really working that great, you still have plenty of time to save what you're doing before the battery dies. So when you're plugged in and the power goes out, your computer doesn't shut down.
Mm.
And I forgot about that once or twice when I first got this desktop, and I was like, oh, darn it. That's more of an inconvenience than I originally thought. But so many of the programs that I work with have autosave now, which is nice.
Oh God, thank God. Man, if Pages didn't have autosave for any of the stuff that I was working on, I'm sure I would forget to save 98% of my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember the horror as a kid, like writing something and then like accidentally just closing down an entire Microsoft
Mm-hmm.
Word file and being like, no, everything is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently there's a way to save it, but I was also like 12 and didn't know how to. Um,
Yeah, I'm a with Photoshop, because I've been using the software for so long, and before it had autosaves. I am someone that constantly kind of like control command S for me is
mm,
I hit it a lot. Or command shift S actually, because I usually, especially for client work, I usually save in like sequence, so I'll have multiple files before I'm done. So in case I have to backtrack or something like that, make a mistake that's not, I've lost a layer or something like that I need to get back. That's always nice.
mm, yeah.
But I do find specifically Premiere has crashed on me a few times, and I found that their autosave is quite good in that it saves like an archive so that you can actually go and retrieve it, and it's you can set in the settings like whether you want it to happen every 5 minutes, every 15 minutes, whatever. And
Oh,
I'm
good.
usually pretty good because I take frequent breaks, and when I take a break, when I get up and step away from the computer, I always save before I leave the room. So usually every half an hour to an hour, I've got stuff saved. But sometimes, like writing, like when I'm editing a video, my Let's Play videos for Minecraft are uh, very off the cuff. Like I'm editing a stream, so I don't have like 6 or 8 clips that I just tie together. It's not necessarily a quick edit anymore. Um, I kill two birds and record and stream at the same time, but I have to kind of like scrub through and decide which bits to keep. So editing a 15 or 20-minute video can be more time consuming, and the decisions are made kind of like on the fly. It's linear as opposed to like having several clips to then just cut together. So, and lately, especially with these last videos, because of what I was doing, the audio was low and I don't want to say they were boring, but it was a slower gameplay vibe because I was working in the end, for people that don't play Minecraft, it's a place where you can fall and die a lot. So
Right.
I was a little bit more reserved. Like my personality when I was recording was very just like don't die focused. So I wasn't talking as
Mm-hmm.
much. So it became a
Right.
challenge to edit those videos into something that was a little bit more lively, had a little bit more content. So yeah, so that I didn't want to lose any of that work,
Right.
which is cool. With your when you're writing, like, do you ever think to write in something like the cloud, like on Google Docs, where it's just kind of like saving every other second, so that you really will never
Um,
lose anything?
no, and stupidly because I don't like the way Google Docs looks.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I'm writing, it's very busy and Pages is not like it's really easy to make everything go away.
Right. Yeah. You
So
can.
you're just
Yeah.
focusing.
Just the
So
page.
that's what I like to focus on now, but I save it to iCloud. So it's still being saved to a cloud.
Ah. Okay.
And now it saves automatically. And every single time you close the file, it says, yes, save.
Yeah. Save. Yeah. Yeah. I find that
Um,
a lot of software now gives you a big warning before you close it. Like you can't close it without at least acknowledging yes or no. I don't want to save the changes.
uh, yes, yeah. So so if you hit the close button, it'll say right away, do you want to save whatever changes? Or it
Yeah.
just says like save changes,
Yeah. Yes or no.
yeah. So that's kind of a good reminder as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it does do the auto saving too, which is very, very handy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but Yeah, no, it's nice using the cloud system because I use my Mac, so with the iCloud files system, I can also work on stuff on my phone too.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm, out and about and I get an idea for something, I can just open up the master file on my phone
Mm-hmm.
and make that change, edit whatever I need to edit. And then when I get back to my computer, the full file is with the changes are still there
Nice.
in my computer, which is super, super handy.
Yeah.
Um,
I
like when I first figured that out, I was like, "What do you mean? This is the best thing!" I was so excited.
yeah.
Oh, it was so great because I was writing everything in like a note, just like a note on my phone,
Mm-hmm.
and then copy and pasting. That didn't that sounded weird. Copy pasting everything
Mm-hmm.
into the master file again. But when I realized I could just edit in the master file, my whole workflow just became so much easier.
Nice. Yeah. No, I do something very similar when I'm working on podcasts. I don't use a word processing app because I don't need anything that robust. But really, all I'm doing is
Right.
writing the little blurb about the description of the episode, putting in links, putting in hashtags and things like that for social media, and
Hmm.
I save it to a notes file that I can then access on my phone, so I don't have to copy. Like I can copy paste, but I can write it on a keyboard, and then when I'm doing social media, and in some cases, for example, like Instagram.
Right.
I can't do that from my computer. Twitter I can, but not Instagram. And so it becomes a lot easier on that kind of stuff to just be able to just open it up on the phone and just copy paste it into the social media post, which is great. And I really, because I have to post on so many different platforms, including platforms I really don't spend much time on, I'm just kind of broadcasting on to promote the show. It
Right.
just saves me a lot of time to be able to just like highlight this whole blurb and just copy paste it into whatever social media window I'm using, Facebook, LO, Instagram, like whatever it is, and then just like quickly edit it around so that it works within that platform and looks, because sometimes hashtags are in different places and things like that,
Right.
and use that to my advantage. And being able to do that all in one central file is fantastic, especially when that central file has spell check, because the software that I was using to edit the show had a place to do a little blurb about the show, but that didn't have spell check in it. It's just like, what? It's like Photoshop. Photoshop doesn't have spell check, and it used to trip me up all the time when I made comics because I would be not necessarily spelling mistakes, but I'd be making typos in the word balloons, and because I would just be trying to get the comic out, and Photoshop doesn't catch it, right? So I'd have to like triple proofread all my comics before I post them, and I had a couple people um, point that out to me in comments, which I always find really annoying. But
Hmm.
yeah, so especially when it's just like people are correcting your spelling when really it's very clearly a typo and a very common typo. And it's just like, you
Yeah.
spelled this wrong. It's like, no, my finger slipped and I forgot and I didn't catch it. I didn't spell it wrong. I know how to spell the word. it's you know what I mean? Like it's one of those things that I always got really kind of bent out of shape for. And plus people don't take the time to do any kind of like, hey, by the way, just wanted to point out that you think you missed this word might be misspelled. And it's like, oh, thanks. It's not it's never that gentle. It's always like you messed this up. It's like, oh, thanks. Appreciate that. Thanks for pointing that out publicly so that everybody now notices. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I did occasionally have one person or two people write me, like a DM or something like that, saying like, hey, by the way, check your spelling or check the typo on that. So, because sometimes it would not be necessarily a word misspelled, it would be like a punctuation change. But
Yeah.
you know,
Those can screw up things so much.
oh,
It's amazing.
exactly, yeah. Putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable, it's always a tricky. It's always a tricky thing.
You
Uh,
just remind me. Wait, did you ever see those vines of that guy who was just like pronouncing things incorrectly?
no,
And he would just like
no.
you've never. Oh, they're so good. It's like this guy. Like there's one where he's in the grocery store, and he's just what is it? Basically just like looking at signs of like fruit,
Right.
but he pronounces them incorrectly. So papaya was papa yeah, and for some reason it was really funny to me. That's one of my favorites. I'll
Nice.
have to see if I can send that to you
Yeah.
because they're amazing.
That kind of stuff is
But he
always
just
really good. Yeah.
I love it. It's like it's stupid funny humor, but it's so wholesome humor at the
Yeah,
same time.
yeah.
Like I
Well,
don't know.
it's clever. It's just like it's just looking at the world just slightly differently.
Yeah.
I've got one story in relation to that, and I promise we'll move on. But one of the YouTube people that I follow, he's a Minecraft player and a filmmaker, a mumbo jumbo, and he recently on the Hermitcraft server, which is the server that he plays on, received like
Hmm.
a challenge from another server mate named Green. They're playing this hot potato game where if you receive this potato in your inventory, which is a prank being played on you by another player, then you have to do like a penalty. And so Green wrote the penalty that Mumbo had to do the introduction on his next YouTube video in another language, knowing full well that Mumbo is not bilingual in any way, shape, or form. Like
Oh.
he jokingly in his video said like I barely speak English, like, and he's British, right? And he's like I barely have a handle on this language. You want me to do what? So what was really funny, and I didn't expect him to go this far, was that he got together with another server mate, Iskal, who is from Sweden, and so Mumbo did
Yeah.
his intro in Swedish, and like
Wow.
yeah, and the whole time he also recorded parts of the tutoring session that Iskal gave him to try and teach him how to translate, pronounce, and then say his intro in Swedish, and it was really really funny because there were words and word sounds that Mumbo was like, that doesn't even sound like a word. Like that, it's so weird to me that this sound, which is like, three consonants and one vowel, it's just like, how does this word,
How does this work?
because usually in Latin based languages, like sometimes even if they're pronounced very differently, if you look at them on paper or in text, the words for like say French, Spanish, and English for like the word excellent will look very similar, right? Like it'll have the same sort of form or I'll say spirit to it, I guess. But
Hmm.
Mumbo was just like, I think he was trying to say the word episode, and it started with like a T or something. And Mumbo was like, wait, what? Like this does not make any sense. And it wasn't even two or three syllables. It was like one syllable or something like that. It was barely a sound. And he's like, that means episode? Like it's a really, really funny video. And he did very well with it. Even Isco was quite impressed, which I thought was really good. But it just kind of reminded me of like, yeah, there are some things out there that just sound very very strange. And Mumbo was very quick to point out that there's a lot of English words that are silly, that make no
Hmm.
sense whatsoever. Like
Yep.
the word discombobulated is a real word and it means a thing, but it's a silly freaking word. you know?
I think one of my favorite words is persnickety.
Yeah.
It means like, being picky or,
Hmm.
being just, a little bit sideways, but in like a kind of snarky way.
Yep.
But just the word persnickety is just it's a fun word. Um, it's weird. English is
Oh
weird.
yeah.
English is really hard. English is weird. I have so much props for anyone who tries to learn English as a second language who doesn't speak any kind of Germanic language already,
Hmm.
because holy crap. I recently found out that so for example, like the Mandarin language
Hmm.
only really has about, I would say, about 800 sounds for its entire language. 800 vocal sounds that people will make in Mandarin for their entire dialect. English has over 1,500.
Wow.
So that's automatically an extra however many sounds they have to figure out in order to speak our language fluently
Hmm.
that they may not have spoken before. Japanese is even harder. Japanese only has like 150 sounds for its entire language. And if people try to learn English, that's like you have over 1,000 words to learn, 1,000 sounds you have to try and produce that you've never produced before.
Mm.
That's crazy. So that's why it's so difficult. I would say that like Mandarin is really difficult for its writing system,
Hmm.
because the writing system is very very that there's over 1,000 characters for like their writing, but the actual language, the spoken language, is much more simplistic. Um, but the other difficult part of it is like the tones, like how you say a word and the inflection you put on on a particular sound or on a particular vowel changes the meaning of it entirely. I think that's what people find very, very complicated. And Arabic is also very difficult. I don't know much about Arabic, so I'm not sure. I know that the writing system is right to left instead of left to
Yeah.
yeah, right to left instead of left to right. I just want to make sure I was got my left and rights all sorted out. Um, but yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
English is hard.
In a weird kind of like have a random thought and then Amazon presents you with a strange advertisement or something that you didn't realize that you had clicked on. Shortly after, I guess it was maybe the next day or something like that. I was on Facebook and it was an ad or something flew by because I'm rarely on Facebook. I think I was posting about probably just sharing a story as a matter of fact. But someone had shared that all the C's in the phrase Pacific Ocean are pronounced differently.
Oh shit!
So there's 3 C's in Pacific Ocean, and none of them have the same sound, right?
3 C. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So there's Pacific Ocean, and so there's a s, a k, and a sh all in there at the same time, in the same 2 words, like just like woof. Okay, So and I agree. Like I know a couple people that teach English as a second language, and they're always just like, yeah, you think learning something like French or German is hard? Try learning like the English language, where we can't even decide half the time what means what, Most time people
learning
get it wrong
any
anyway.
language is difficult though. Like
Absolutely. Yeah.
You're forcing yourself to learn a whole new vocabulary entirely.
Yes.
Honestly, like for anyone who has kids, like if you want your kid to speak another language, introduce them to it early. Like I'm very grateful that my parents put me in French immersion when I was a kid. Like I was fully fluent by the time I was like 8. Because like as a kid your brain is like a sponge. And I couldn't distinguish between like there was a minute I distinctly remember speaking with a friend of mine and she kept being like, "What? What? I don't understand you." And I got really frustrated. I'm like, well, I'm speaking very plainly, and I realized, oh, I'm speaking French, and she doesn't speak French.
Right.
So I had to like flip my brain, but I would just bounce back and forth between the two, no problem. Now that's not as easy because I took a couple years off from French immersion, and I haven't actually spoken conversational French in many years, but I still have a good foundation for the language. So getting back into it is not difficult. Like I read more or less everything I understand more or less everything that I read. There might be a couple words that I'm like, what's that? And it's maybe more advanced, like adult colloquial French that I hadn't really used. And we didn't really learn any colloquial French in school. Like as a kid, when you're learning it as, when it becomes second nature, you're just kind of learning all the colloquialisms anyway. But like when you're in school and you're like learning it as a second language, you're basically learning the right way to say things and not like the slang that comes with it. So my French is probably very, very formal, but it's way easier to get back into it. But so even if you don't stick with it right away, you're still always going to have that bit of a foundation. So it's always, as a kid, it's always best to learn a language then. But if you're good at music, apparently, if anyone's good at music, they're amazing at languages.
I was going to bring that up. I was going to say that I believe that I've heard before that people that have an ear for music are really good at picking up additional languages because they just have the ear for those sounds and potentially the rhythms that different languages have, like that sort of thing. Do you speak Swahili? No, me either. I bring it up on purpose, though, because I wanted to share a story about Kenya. And I picked this up on Daily Tech News Show, one of my favorite podcasts. I'm going to slight plug for one of my favorite shows. I think people should go check that out. But in Kenya, they've launched the largest wind power plant in Africa. And it has
that's cool.
over 100 windmills, I believe. And it is, what was the name? I read it just before the show, but I'm already forgetting the name of the corridor because it has it's not a name I'm used to hearing. But it's essentially there's a large jet stream that goes from India down through Africa and in through Kenya. And so they're taking advantage of this always flowing air mass. And it is called the Turkana I guess, jet stream. And Lake Turkana wind power will generate around 310 megawatts of power to the national grid, which will increase the country's electricity supply by 13%. Kenya is trying to reach green energy efficiency to 100% by 2020. That is 6 months away. They are one
Wow.
of the world leaders in terms of attempting to get their power off of any kind of non-sustainable energy sources. I don't
Amazing.
know how. Unfortunately, off the top of my head, Kenya is not a ginormous country. I mean, it's big enough, but it's not. It's not something the size of like Canada or the U.S. or anything like that.
No,
Um,
no, no.
but I would imagine that there's probably not a large amount of the population that's consuming the power because I imagine there's a lot of rural stuff. However,
You'd be surprised though.
yeah, but at the same time,
Yeah,
those rural, I mean, I would imagine the rural communities were probably already on alternative energy anyway, because a windmill would be a lot easier to get power from than trying to run cables, from a power plant or something. Uh,
exactly.
most of the power in Kenya is already supplied by geothermal and, of course, hydro. It's the big one because of some of the powerful rivers and waterways and stuff that are happening in the country. But anyway, it was a really, really cool, I guess, flag or feather in the cap for Kenya in terms of leading Africa and in some places leading the world in these wind farms. And these are not small. These are 52-meter diameter windmills. It's 170 feet in terms of
Hmm.
the wingspan, we'll say, of one of these windmills. So I had the article does not mention anything about environmental impact in terms of like migratory birds or anything like that. At first glance, I was like, well, they don't look that tall, but that's because the turbines are so wide that it makes it look like a quote unquote squat windmill. But if they're 52 meter, if they're 52 meters across, then they're at least 52 meters tall, if not probably closer to, I would say closer to 100 meters tall, which is that's not a small windmill.
No.
No, this is a big thing. So there was no real talk, and I might want to do a little bit more digging to kind of figure out like what that might affect. But at the same time, if it's a non-migratory location, or if these things, while they're big, are just still not tall enough to interfere with like where birds, if they would fly higher most of the time, you know.
Yeah.
Because of course the other thing is that when with the photos that they showed of the farm, there's just a whole lot of nothing. Like there's no trees, there's barely any grass. Like it's really kind of just like desert, tundra kind of landscape. So I would say the impact to the environment or wildlife would probably be pretty minimal because I don't know there'd be a lot larger than say like lizards and small stuff like that out there.
Hmm.
Pure speculation, just based on what I know from landscapes and watching nature shows and what usually resides in those kinds of areas. They're usually quite small. So, but yeah, no, I thought it was a really neat story, and it was just kind of really inspiring to see such a small country invest.
Yeah.
I mean, there's other
As
investors. It's
such a
not just
small
yeah,
country and what would be considered maybe a poor country
yeah, and I would say probably.
putting
Sorry, go ahead.
sorry, go ahead. No, I was gonna say like they're putting all of their like evidently sustainable energy is not as expensive as I'm sure some world leaders would have you believe.
Hmm.
Because if a smaller, generally poorer country like Kenya can do it, yo, we can too. Like
Yeah,
it's
I think the main difference in a lot of these places, because you see this a lot in Africa, is because it's such a vast country, or continent, I should say. Country. Africa's not a country, Joel. But it's such a vast landscape that the overall development of electrical infrastructure is behind compared to North America, Europe, that sort of thing. So rather than having to undo what they have done, they can just do it right the first time. So I'm sure that's part of it.
mm,
But I think there's also, like you said, there's less politics in terms of like
yeah.
trying to keep things the old way. Because again, I don't think. Well, I mean, there's the power company Kengen, which is state owned, produces approximately 80% of the electricity consumed in Kenya, and of that, 65% comes from hydropower sources, which it sells to Kenya Power, the country's main electricity transmission company. So, like, while Kenya, and there's also an outside investor too, but while Kenya is investing into the infrastructure, it's also selling the power. You know, the government is selling the power to like a local company that distributes and stuff. So like, I'm sure there's a lot of business involved in it too. Like, it's not just for the sake of the planet, which is good. But I've seen many reports over the last little while as this kind of stuff has been surfacing more and more, that green energy is cheaper than the alternative, and I'm hoping that, like you said, the example being set by what is perceived to be a relatively poor country in comparison to others, it kind of spurs some governments to follow suit.
Because the excuse of, oh, there's just not enough money for it, is complete and utter bullshit.
Yeah, crap. We won't get into too much of the politics of it, but yeah, no, there's a lot to be said for this kind of stuff. Anyway, I thought it was neat. It's also really cool to see. Like, you and I saw some windmills when we were out for our hike. There was only 3, but this, seeing 100 of them, like, it's actually it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. That's I'm trying to stay true to my trying to find some sort of fun or cool environmental story to share on the show every week,
which I appreciate. I really like it.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Me too. It's fun for me too, because it's one of those things where, like, I see them all the time and I share them on Facebook sometimes, just because it's like one click and share. It's kind of my effort to kind of like usurp all the political negative crap that's on Facebook.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to sell some, not only is it environmental news, but it's usually not like doom and gloom. It's like, hey, here's some place that's doing it right. Here's some cool stuff to talk about. But speaking of cool stuff to talk about, over the past weekend, San Diego Comic-Con 2019 happened. So I thought, rather than talking about what we've been watching, because I really haven't been watching a whole lot, I thought Megan and I could just kind of like go over some of the bullet points, some of the things that we think were cool from San Diego. There was a ton.
A lot.
To paraphrase Cosmic Dancer from our Discord, which is where we talk about, stuff like Comic-Con all week long.
Hi, Cosmic Dancer.
She is just excited to be a geek. There's just so much happening, and I agree. I think it's really cool to see so much content and so much varied content. Like, it's not just just Star Trek. We'll get to that, but it's not just Star Trek and Star Wars anymore. Like, there's so much more happening. And I think the elephant in the room to get out of the way is the Marvel comic universe moving on to Phase 4, which has now gone beyond Endgame and Infinity War and into other movies, and focuses very heavily on Disney Plus, the new streaming service coming from Disney. That's going to be launching November 12th in the States, and then first quarter 2020 for Canada and I think some other countries as well. I thought the article that I looked up earlier mentioned the price, but it's around Netflix pricing. Like, it's somewhere between $10 and $12 a month. I think 10 is what's sticking in my head, but I think that's American. So for Canadians, it might be more like 12 or $12.99 or something like that. Still, it's a lot of content for that. It's not as, I don't want to say not stingy, but like, say for example, Amazon Prime. While they have a lot of quality stuff, from what I can hear, I've not watched anything there, but I hear really good things from most people. But it's not the same kind of library that you would have on, say, Netflix or something like Disney, because of the libraries that Disney has access to. Especially now that they own the film portion of 20th Century Fox. Like, that's just banana town. So
they own everything.
I know.
I saw this really great tweet a little bit ago, and it was just like, wow, all right, so Disney managed to surpass Disney in overtaking this, like the highest grossing movie. Meanwhile, Disney is coming up and, just coming up a little bit behind Disney and, with this other new thing that's coming out, because Disney owns everything now.
Yeah, it really does.
All of it.
Yeah, it really does. I think that was in reference to Endgame being the highest grossing film of all time.
Yeah. It beat out Avatar.
Which
is also owned by Disney.
Yeah, but I have to also go back and look and see, like, well, did Avatar, how long was Avatar in theaters? Because I feel like Endgame has been in theaters for like 3 months. So,
Avatar was in theaters for a little bit
was
too,
it?
and they had a re-release and
Oh,
everything
did
too.
they?
Like
Okay.
they did the same thing that Avengers. So yeah, basically you're paying like $16 again to go see an extra 6 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, I would go
Which
see
I
it
was
just
like,
for the
I'm
sake.
not
I
going.
saw it twice. They got my money, and that's fine. Like I
Yeah,
enjoyed it, but um,
I enjoyed it. I went to go see it twice too.
mhm.
Um, but I don't think I would pay again just to see an extra 6 minutes. I'll wait
No,
till that comes
no,
out, I think.
yeah, that I can wait for. So.
But no, Avatar had like an Earth Day release where they had an
Oh,
extended release and
right.
stuff where they just added like a couple extra scenes that had been cut, and it honestly helped the flow of the movie a bit more. It was already a long movie, but like it
Hmm.
helped the flow of it a little bit more.
I
Um,
haven't seen that in a long time. I own it. I own it on Blu-ray, and it's I
yeah,
don't see. I don't have a HD TV anymore. Like I don't really have a nice television, so I have not been watching many movies. Most of my stuff is like Netflix and YouTube and stuff that I watch. So,
yeah,
when I get back into having, I kind of am enjoying the fact of not having a big cinema home experience because when I do eventually get a new TV, I will probably go back and rewatch and enjoy things like, Lord of the Rings on Blu-ray, Star Wars on Blu-ray, the kind of things that
yeah,
really have a cool cinema experience when you're watching them in high def. By that point, it might even
right,
be 4K. Who knows? Um,
right.
but to get into the phase four, I'll just go through and read all the bullets and we can just go back and discuss as we see fit. But coming up, we've got Black Widow, May 1st, 2020. The Falcon and Winter Soldier, Fall 2020. That's a series on Disney Plus. Eternals, November 6th, 2020. That stars Angelina Jolie, Richard Madden from Game of Thrones, and others. Shang-Chi, The Legend of the Ten Rings, February 12th, 2021. So we're already getting into 2021. WandaVision, Spring 2021. I had to look up to see what that was. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I forgot to write down when that comes out, but I'm assuming also 2021. Starring Benedict Cumberbatch as well as Elizabeth Olsen as the Scarlet Witch in the Multiverse of Madness. So that's going to be a cool matchup. I'm looking forward to that.
Mm-hmm.
Loki, Spring 2021, which I believe is a Disney series on Disney Plus.
Yep.
What If? I have no idea what this is, but it's 2021 Disney Plus. Hawkeye, Fall 2021. Again, Disney Plus. See what I mean? Big one, and I'll have more to say on this later. Thor, Love and Thunder will come out November 5th, 2021, starring Natalie Portman, returning as Jane Foster, who will become Thor. Directed by Taika Waititi. And I think that's it for now. Captain Marvel 2, I didn't really find any info other than the fact that there was a logo. Blade, which is going to star, let's see if I can get his name right, Mahershala Ali, I believe I pronounced that correctly,
Mm-hmm.
starring as Blade. And Fantastic Four, again, very, very little info about that other than just like pre-production announced, which I think people are excited for. I'm going to save... You know what? I'll read it now. I was going to save this for later, but to bump back up into a neat little Canadian tie-in to Shang-Chi, The Legend of the Ten Rings, Canadian actor Simu Liu, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, is cast as Marvel's first Chinese superhero, Shang-Chi. The Canadian actor was born in, where was he? Born in
Malaysia,
China,
I think, right?
born in
China.
China, but then raised in Mississauga, Ontario. He would be known for starring on as Jung Kim on Kim's Convenience, a CBC sitcom. So that's kind of
Oh
where he
yes, I
hails
know
from.
Kim's
Yeah,
Convenience.
yeah, yeah.
That's actually a really good show too.
I hear it's very funny. I have not seen it, but
Mm.
I hear good things. But he's got a degree from the Richard Ivey School of Business, Western University. I mean, he's obviously a well-known Canadian actor, but it's I shouldn't say kind of cool. It's very cool that Marvel is diversifying and bringing some titles that I did not know existed. Had only heard of through other comic nerds being excited about them because while I was familiar with Captain America and Hulk and Thor and the Avengers through pop culture and through other things, going into the first few phases of the Marvel comic universe, uh, Eternals, Shang-Chi, WandaVision, What If, even the series of comics where Thor is a female character, I'm not familiar with at all. So I've got
Mm.
very little, we'll say like pre-existing fandom kind of out there.
Right.
I'm excited and and think that the Falcon and the Winter Soldier will be a fun television show. Like I like the idea of like essentially it looks like from what I can we'll say assume from their appearances in the Captain America movies, it's going to be a superhero buddy cop show, right? Like that's
Yes.
sort of
Well,
what
and like
yeah.
I think that's what everyone wanted. It's gonna be like one of those snarky buddy cop things
Yeah.
because they just kept snarking at each other the whole
Yeah,
time.
it's basically it's like Lethal Weapon, except for Danny Glover and Mel Gibson have got superpowers,
Yeah, exactly.
and high tech, right? So I shouldn't say
Exactly.
superpowers because they're not super powered. They're enhanced, like they've just got some extra
Yeah.
gear, right?
Yeah.
Well, no, I guess Bucky is technically a super soldier, right? He's one of
Yeah.
yeah. So there's that, but essentially, they're not like they don't fly of their own
No.
magical abilities
Their
or
own
anything like
accord,
that.
yeah.
But I'm trying to think about the ones that have my attention the most. I'm curious about the Eternals, especially with the cast.
Mm-hmm.
Richard Madden played Robb Stark for people that don't remember on Game of Thrones. He only made it a couple seasons. Spoiler. Um, but he's a good actor. I like quite enjoy
He's a
him.
very good actor.
Angelina Jolie, I can't see her as anything other than Angelina Jolie in anything that she's in. So I'm not saying she's not a good actor. I just find that there's something to be said, I think, too, for actors that are more chameleons when you put them in these kind of roles.
Yeah.
I say that, and yet, like there's a lot of people that have been in the Avengers films that are big stars, that just they have that ability to just kind of like roll with it. Like I think Cumberbatch is one.
Yeah.
Some of the other. I mean, granted, I haven't seen Chris Evans in a lot of other things, but like I don't think of him as Chris Evans. I think of him as Captain America.
Yeah.
Robert Downey Jr., another person that kind of like
Well,
rolls
no,
into
I
that.
I just does he? I don't think so. I just feel like he's Robert Downey Jr. in everything. Like he's
Mm,
like his character's all gonna have this weird quirky, just like shruggy, nonchalant sort
yeah,
of
no, I guess
attitude.
you're right. Yeah, I guess you're right. See, and this the problem there is that I've not seen him in much else. Where I've seen a lot of films with, say, Scarlett Johansson in them, and she can be quite different in different films.
Mm.
It's a
Yeah.
lot more subtle. It's not as dramatic as, say, Cumberbatch. Um, but I'm looking forward to. Paul Bettany is another chameleon. He can be,
Paul Bettany.
yeah, he
I
can
do
be
like
kind
me
of,
some Paul
yeah, he
Bettany.
can do whatever he wants. That guy. Um, so I guess yeah, Eternals I'm looking forward to because I know nothing, which is kind of cool. It's kind of nice going into that having no idea what anything is and how it's gonna go. WandaVision I was like, oh, is that a new comic character? And then I realized, oh, no, that's Wanda and the Vision, as in the Scarlet Witch and Vision is alive.
Mm.
So
I don't know if maybe like she just took on his name.
I don't know. I think they're bringing Vision back. I didn't get it. I tried to get as much reading as I could done before the show today, and there was articles about like, here's how we explain how Vision comes back. Now that's the headline. Whether it's clickbait or not, I don't know. I hope it's not a prequel. I don't care if it's a prequel. Like I don't want to know what happens between Avengers 1 and 2.
Right.
Now that I know how it ends, I never like that kind of stuff because there's no peril, right? So because like for example, if they're doing the adventures of Wanda and Vision, then the end. So any
Yeah.
kind of threat that happens to either one of them during that show or movie means nothing because that they're in the other movies down the line. So
Yeah, no, it's
that
true.
kind of
I'm
stuff I always
hoping
find
it's
really
something
empty.
that's like somehow they managed to bring him back
Yeah.
in
Um,
some way. But also Black Widow though too, like she did.
yeah. No, there's that too.
Spoiler.
Yeah.
Like
I th-
so
I
I mean
think
I
the
wonder if they're gonna do something hinky.
I think the change with Black Widow, or the reason why I'm optimistically curious, is well, I mean, one, it's good to see another female lead, and I feel like the Black Widow movie should have maybe been done a little while ago.
Yeah.
But
Like before Ant-Man in my opinion, but that's
yeah,
just me.
but there's enough backstory and mystery with that character that we just don't know. That I'd be curious about how she got to be where she is and who she is. I wouldn't be so much worried about like is she going to survive or not because we know she does to become an Avenger. But it's one of those things
Right.
where I'm more curious about her backstory. Um,
Yeah.
certainly more curious than I am between like what happens between Wanda and Vision, And again, like I'm speculating, I know nothing. So I mean, I also trust Marvel. So as much as I am critical about some of these ideas, I'm just like, well, they've not. I thought Ant-Man was going to be a dumb movie. It's actually really fun. So like I have to. They've proven me wrong. They've taken my assumptions and said like, nope, you thought that, but we're gonna do it differently, and they've done it very well so far. I've got no idea what if is about. Hawkeye is a television series. I'm on board. I like Jeremy Renner. I think Hawkeye is a
I'm on board.
fun, snarky
I just
character.
want to know what happened in Budapest.
Yes.
That's all I want to know.
Hmm.
That's all I want to know. That's the only thing. I hope there's some kind of like crossover between Hawkeye and Black Widow. I hope it discusses the whole Budapest thing. I just
Hmm.
want to know. At the same time, though, it's just become this ongoing joke for years where like they're just like, just reminds you of Budapest all over again. And everyone's like, what happened to Budapest? They've just never,
It's one of those things that
talked
they
about
they
it
could they
again.
could roll out the reference like once a season on Hawkeye, just as like a must be included, must never be explained. Just put it
Yeah.
in there for the fans. That could be very, very
Yeah.
funny. You know,
Yeah.
give him a cat called Budapest.
Yeah.
That would be kind
Yeah.
of funny. So I'm curious as to what you think about Thor: Love and Thunder and Natalie Portman.
I'm I'm really excited for it. So I know you said you didn't know much about the comic book story. There was a period of time in the comic books where Thor lost his ability to wield Mjolnir. And the only person who could pick it up was Jane. They didn't. I mean, I didn't go into details as to why that was, but with her, I think she's been proven to be pretty resilient
Hmm.
in a lot of different scenarios. So she just sort of like picked up Mjolnir and was like, okay, well, I guess I better do something with this, and decided to take, as sort of like an honor to Thor, because it is Thor's hammer. She just sort of took up the mantle, I guess. Um, I'm into it. I mean, I like Natalie Portman anyway. I think she's a really good actor when she's given an opportunity to act. I feel like sometimes she's kind of shoved aside for other things. Um, and I like Taika Waititi. I know you're probably not a super big fan of him. I really like him. I think he's able to find a good balance of humor and heartfelt in his stuff. Like I just went back and I watched Thor Ragnarok again, and I still really like Thor Ragnarok. It's a fun, silly romp, but it also has moments of heart in there as well, like heart and deep feeling and emotion. And I think it's difficult to balance that, and I think Taika does it well. Um, and I don't know, like I'm into it. I'm always into more female superheroes anyway.
Mm.
So I don't know. I'm excited for it. That's probably the one I'm the most looking forward to. Just
I
like the way he like presented her with the hammer. It was
yes,
just like
yeah, that was
it's like presenting Excalibur to the
yeah.
next
I
king,
mean, that was
right?
funny.
And I
That
was
was
like,
fun
I
and
was into
funny
that.
and nerdy
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And I don't even think she was expecting that because from her reaction,
Mm-hmm.
it seemed pretty genuine. I really like Natalie Portman. I find her to be a very good actor in most things. I find some of her film choices to be a little bit weird sometimes. I went to go see Annihilation, and she was in that, and she did a very good job. But the film itself was just really out there and kind of hard. And
Yeah.
because it was so serious and so weird, it felt like there was never any kind of exploration of character. The characters were just weirded out the whole time. Like it felt like it was just one tone. And that's not to say that
Mm.
that's on her as an actor. That's on the director and the writer. And like you
Yeah.
can, I mean, if you're directed in a certain way, that's what you do, right? Um, I I don't have any hangups about like looking the part or anything like that because I feel like with Thor being such a magical ish superhero, godlike powers, that kind of thing, it really doesn't matter. Like you can, as long as you can portray that power, the fact that she's not 6 feet tall
Hmm.
doesn't really matter because she's. I mean, let's face it. Natalie Portman is a very small human.
She's tiny.
Yeah, she's
Yeah.
not a very big person. A lot of, I think, I didn't realize it until you and I think talked about it recently. But there's just an awful lot of camera trickery that happens in cinematography to make people look like they're more like 5'6", when they're really 5'2".
Yeah.
And of course, and high heels and all that kind of stuff has a thing. Like if you're just in a dramatic comedy, or you're just in a show where you're just kind of standing around talking, like if people are comfortable standing in taller shoes, it's just going to make your shot look better, as opposed to someone talking
Or apple boxes or something.
Yeah, like someone talking down to their navel. That's a really funny story actually about Tom Welling and Kristen Crook from Smallville. A lot of their more intimate scenes, she's standing on a box because he's like a foot plus taller than her or something crazy. I remember there was one scene. I don't remember what season it was, but Clark had been sick. Superman got hit by kryptonite or something like that. And so Clark, as everybody knows him, was like ill and under the weather and had a fever and all that kind of stuff. So people were just concerned for Clark. And when he was well, she came over and saw him standing in his hallway, and she ran up and she gave him a hug and she jumped into his arms. So granted, he's holding her a little bit taller, like her head is kind of like up on his shoulder, but her feet are dangling like a foot and a half off the ground. Like he spins around and you're like, oh my God, she is really small.
She's little.
Yeah, but stuff like that, that doesn't really, I don't have any concerns about that. Really, for me, it's more about Watiti, and I like Thor Ragnarok, but I dislike sections of Thor Ragnarok.
Right.
I love the visuals. I love the over the top. What's the character that Goldblum plays? I can't remember.
The Grandmaster.
Grandmaster. So everything on the Grandmaster's planet is just like, it's great sci-fi. It's great over the top stuff. It's all kind of like theatrics, and I'm okay with that. It's the ad-libbing jokey joke stuff that I find really condescending.
I really like it though.
Well,
I think I know why you find it condescending.
Yeah, but it's the kind of thing where it's just like, and again, it's just not my brand of humor. There are plenty of people like you that think that it's great, and I'm just like, yeah, but Korg is just like, hey, I made a joke. I'm gonna make another joke. Did you hear the joke I just made? Because here's another one. Made a joke. And it's just like, and for whatever reason, for me, it just puts a grinding halt on any kind of suspension of disbelief. I am no longer, on whatever planet with Thor. I'm in a movie theater watching a Thor film, and it's just like, oh, right. Thank you, Watiti. Appreciate you breaking the fourth wall. So that I always find takes me out a little bit. But I mean, that said, overall, I still really enjoy Thor Ragnarok. So, there are things I think that that will balance out, in the long run, and plus, I mean, like, I would imagine there's going to be some input from Natalie Portman, and I mean, I'm sure she's going to be interested in a fun ride, but also kind of wants to bring her own, stamp on the Marvel universe, and I hope that they listen. Captain Marvel 2, I'm surprised there was not as much info, like talking about like big movies and big, female led character movies. I'm surprised they didn't have a lot more to say about Captain Marvel 2. They only just said, yeah, it's happening. It's like, wow.
I mean, I think because there's so much stuff coming out soon, like so soon, and they're probably under a huge NDA.
Yeah, I know, and I guess, right, and that's the other thing too, is that you probably can't say a whole lot about Captain Marvel 2 because of where they stuck it. Like, because it's like 2021 and probably summer, I would imagine that there's a bunch of other things that have to happen, and there could potentially be, like, maybe Captain Marvel shows up in cameos. Like, I mean, this is all one ginormous company, like we mentioned earlier. So, I mean, Captain Marvel could show up in like the Hawkeye Disney TV show for a cameo. We just don't know. And that's it's part of the genius and part of the I don't really want to subscribe to another service kind of dread that I have. But it's kind of one of those things where, like, Marvel and Disney have kind of got a lot of nerds over a barrel, just like, yep, if you want to find all this kind of stuff, you're gonna have to try out Disney Plus. Not to mention that's where Star Wars is going to be. There's a bounty hunter show coming, which I didn't even see anything about at Comic-Con. I didn't look. I got sidetracked by all the Marvel comic stuff, and I had to like do so much research just to wrap my head around it that that I just lost, I lost myself in it. But we should probably move on away from the comic stuff and get into some good old fashioned sci-fi, because I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this. Because I am really excited, having seen the trailer for Star Trek Picard. Have you seen this?
I haven't seen it yet, but Alistair's talked about it with me,
Oh,
and I know if he's excited, I know it's gonna be good.
and it's
And if you're
oh.
excited and who's someone I wouldn't say that you're a super Star Trek guy.
I like Star Trek, but I'm not a Trekkie. Like, I wouldn't identify
So
a
like
Trekkie.
Alistair's a Trekkie.
Yeah, so
Alistair's 100%
I
a
had a
Trekkie.
really fun conversation with Alistair about this, and I'm going to take a slight jab at Alistair. It was surprisingly brief. I was it was fun.
We love you, Alistair.
But I think the trick there is that he just texted me right now.
Yeah.
That's so funny because this is not live. That's great.
Amazing.
Anyway, what I found so interesting about it is that it tells you all you need to know. And for me, I don't feel the need to go digging. I am quite content to just wait and see when
Mhm.
it comes out and explore it, because it was like a lot of familiar. It has all the right notes. Literally, the last few notes of the trailer are cues to the TNG theme song. Like it's
Amazing.
just so good. There is Data. There's Borg. There's Seven of Nine. There's Captain Picard saying engage. Like, it is enough to kind of just make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. But it also looks like no other Star Trek I've ever seen. It obviously has a very measured pace because
Mhm.
Picard is 18 years older. Um, I think we talked about this when we talked about the announcement on the Citadel Cafe, but it's set in the Star Trek universe the exact same amount of time as has passed here in the real world. So I think it's 18 or 19 years since the last time we saw Picard in a Star Trek film.
Wow.
And so they've taken that, and so they've just in the Star Trek canon, they're setting this 19 years in the future. I think I'm getting that right. It's around that time, which is the exact same amount of time in our world that has passed. So it's kind of cool because I mean, Patrick Stewart at 79, so they're portraying, and Picard. I believe Alistair told me that Picard is supposed to be 92 in Star Trek, because he was a younger actor playing an older captain. In
Okay.
terms of like the real math of everything in the Star Trek universe. But
Right.
I mean, like, and as Alistair joked to me, it's like, well, medical advances in Star Trek, you look a lot better when you're 92. It's like, well,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, you look like you're 79, as a matter of fact. But it looks really, really, really good. It is going to be streamed exclusively on CBS All Access in the US, Amazon Prime in the UK, and 200 other countries. And as per usual, Bell Media has the exclusive in Canada. It is going to be on the Space Channel for cable and on Crave. That's how
That's
that's
good.
how to get it. So yeah, I hope it comes out around the same time or close to Discovery, the next season of Discovery,
Mm.
because that will mean that I can just subscribe to Crave and enjoy like both Star Treks from the same service. I don't have to do like multiple ways of trying to catch stuff, so
Yeah.
that'll be good. But no, I'll have links to uh, all of these trailers in the show notes. The MCU Phase 4 stuff, there's no trailers. It was just announcements, stars walking up on stage. I'll maybe try to find a link to a highlight YouTube video, but really there's not much to see. It's more, these trailers that I'm talking about now are the ones that are going to have more specific links in the show notes. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to that. I know that you've recently been into Discovery. Have you always watched Star Trek? Like, are you a big Star Trek fan?
I kind of grew up with Star Trek a little bit. My mom, I wouldn't say my mom is a Trekkie, but my mom would watch Star Trek. Like I
Mm-hmm.
would come home from school, and she'd be there like folding laundry and like watching Star Trek. So I'd catch the tail end of shows and episodes with her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but for the most part, I never really sat down and watched a full season of Star Trek fully until Discovery. And I think mostly because of the style that everything was shot in. I like the look of Discovery a lot more.
Yes.
Um I like how clean it looks. I like the interesting use of camera angles. Um and I like how cinematic it looks. And I think my problem with Star Trek for the longest time was how now that's also just a matter of age, but like
Yeah.
going back and watching an older show now, like I find I have a hard time watching old movies even.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just watched Rocky Horror Picture Show on Friday for a Pride event, and that was not hard to watch, but like, it's Rocky Horror Picture Show,
Dated.
but like
Yeah.
dated. It's definitely dated.
Yeah.
Um and I don't think Star Trek, at least a lot of the seasons are quite as classic for everybody as say like a lot of old movies would be.
Yeah.
Um so like a lot of them have like a sense of nostalgia and whimsy because of how old they are, but like I don't know. I like Star Trek. I'm not opposed to watching it, but I find I have a harder time focusing on it.
Mm.
And I find that the story, I think because everything's so episodic, I prefer
Yes.
long game story
Mm-hmm.
plots.
Me
I
too.
think that's what it is. That's what it comes down to. It's long game story plots. Every season is a plot, essentially, and sometimes that plot can extend into the second season.
Yeah.
Like the whole premise of the story is extended throughout every episode and not just one. Like for me, episodics are good for children's TV shows. Whereas for
Mm-hmm.
a more serious, more adult show like Star Trek, a longer overarching plot that keeps you engaged and keeps you want to keep watching every single episode, is better for me personally. So I think that's what I like about Discovery a lot more. It's Trek without feeling super Trek,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that that's the reason why some people hated it. That's why I liked it.
And I think that's one of the things we can probably look forward to with Star Trek Picard. And this is speculation. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't read anything, but given the trailer and the complexity of what I think they're hinting at, there's no way it's going to be episodic, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I think
I hope not.
and I would also imagine from the popularity of Discovery that they've looked at that and went like, aha, tap finger on nose.
Mm-hmm.
That is what people are really interested in. Because I agree. I think
This
that
works.
that episodic is really dated, and it becomes a problem because then you kind of, when you're at the end of an episode after the second commercial break in a 45-minute made for television hour-long drama like Star Trek The Next Generation was, there's only so many outcomes that can be completed in the next 15 minutes, so you can start to
Right.
sort of figure out where things are going to go. When it's a season-long plot, you have no
Yeah.
idea. And more shows are not opposed to just killing off characters. So like there's certain
I think Game of Thrones kind of set that precedence.
Yeah.
It's like,
Well-
oh, okay, well, we can do this.
yeah, and even before that, Battlestar Galactica was a really good television show.
Oh, yes,
that
yeah, you're right.
just because you saw someone in the credits did not mean, one, they were going to live, or two, that they were not a Cylon and not aware of it. Like there was a lot of twisty turny stuff in that show, and just because they were in the credit roll did not mean that they were this is the host of Good Guys. So I really. I like that kind of stuff. I'm looking forward to it. The next trailer that caught my attention, I actually saw this ahead of Comic-Con. I think they announced it like the evening of, is The Witcher, starring Henry Cavill.
Mm-hmm.
So I follow him on Instagram, and that's how I found the trailer.
See, I'm not getting. I hate Instagram these days. I'm not. There's so many people I'm following. I'm not getting any of their stuff. Like, I haven't seen anything from Henry Cavill in 1,000 years. I haven't seen anything from Gal Gadot in 1,000 years. Like, all the people that I would like to follow a lot. Tom Hiddleston tweeted or posted on Instagram recently to announce the Loki stuff and be like, hey, I'm excited to work on it. But, like, for the most part, a lot of people I've been following haven't been posting anything. But Witcher, I'm really jazzed for it. I heard about it a while ago. I think there was, like, a teaser for how Geralt was going. Geralt. Every time. I always want to say Gerald. It's Geralt. Every single I saw like the teaser of how Geralt was going to look. And I know there was a bit of people were kind of like, I'm not sure how I feel about that. But I know that Henry Cavill is a huge fan of The Witcher, and he's like, no, I want to do this right. Because he's read all the books, he's played all the games. He's like, no, I just want to do this right. So I'm pretty positive about it. What are your thoughts?
It looks really good. I thought
Yeah.
the trailer had a really cool gritty feel to it. It's a nice fantasy show, like it's swords and sorcery and not too Lord of the Rings tropey. Like it's, there's elves and chaos is this energy, and elves taught humans how to use chaos and turned it into magic, and then the humans killed all the elves. Like it's just they paint a grim kind of world, and I'm sort of looking forward to that. In the trailer, you get to see Henry Cavill a lot. He doesn't say a whole lot. He doesn't really. I think there may be one or two words that he says, and even then, he's not on screen when you're hearing them, so it's kind of hard to figure out if it's actually him. I don't believe he's donning an American accent for this, which is probably nice for him. I think I've only seen him in one or two roles where he's actually been British, because he could do an American accent so well. The one thing that I do find curious, for whatever reason, it might be just the fact that I do follow him on social media, and he seems to be such a charming, positive dude. I find that when he gets like gritty, I find it kind of hard to buy. And I'm sure it's just my own kind of like, bringing my own baggage to the door. And also the fact that Superman isn't a gritty character. So it's like, well, why is he being directed to be gritty? So I'm not sure about that kind of stuff, because again, the trailer doesn't show him really communicating to anybody. I know that he did his own stunts, and I know that I saw a lot of the behind the scenes of like him learning and doing like riding tricks and all kinds of cool stuff on Instagram. And I mean, I really enjoy most films that he's in. Even when I don't like the film, I still find him charismatic and easy to watch. And like there's a certain, I don't know what it is. Like some actors just have that sense of ease, of familiarity. Like I'll watch Tom Hanks in anything. And I very rarely
Meryl Streep will watch her in anything, right?
And I mean, even if the movie is not that great, I'll still watch it because Tom Hanks is in it. For example, like any of the Da Vinci Code stuff, they're not the best movies, but I like Tom Hanks, and he just kind of has that sense of ease, and also is a bit of a chameleon. Like, I mean, he's Tom Hanks and all that he's in, but it never seems like the same guy twice. There's all these really subtle things that he does. And so I find that that's really compelling, and I find the same thing.
That's the son of a good actor.
Yeah, and I find the same thing with Henry Cavill. I liked him. I mean, spoiler: he's the bad guy in Mission Impossible. I don't think it. I mean, I think that was probably pretty clear. But I liked him in it because he doesn't play a gritty bad guy. He just plays a confident bad guy, and there's something about that I think I really enjoyed, because he's dangerous in that way. It's not, his danger is not because he's talking. He's dangerous because he's doing. And I find that is more believable for at least Henry Cavill in that role. I mean, he's also just a crazy physical presence. And when you put him next to a bunch of small people like Tom Cruise and stuff, he's a big dude.
Yeah. Oh my God, he's so big. He's like what, 6'4"?
No, he's not that tall. He's my height. He's like 6'1", maybe 6'2" at most. But no, it's just because he's such a big, in good shape for the superhero roles and the comic book roles and all the kind of stuff that he wants to do. It's really cool. But
it's so funny. Sorry, I'm just thinking, just like that you're like 6'2". Colin is 6 feet, and I'm just thinking of like how much bigger you seem. Like you seem so much taller than he is. But you're also just like a wider. You have like broader shoulders. And
well, I'm a pretty big guy. I mean, like I always have been though, right?
Like more like muscular big though. I'm not. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No. But that's what I mean, like broad and that generally kind of makes. I feel like, even though, because I've stood next to Colin, I feel like he's taller than me, but it's because he's slim, right?
He's slim. Yeah, he's like a rake. Yeah. A rakey boy.
Nice. Henry Cavill is 6'1". We're the same height.
6'1". Okay, yeah. Wow. Yeah, he just seems so giant, but I guess Tom Cruise is also just short.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, like he's going to be still much taller than most Hollywood actors, right? Like outside of like Jason Momoa, he's gonna be taller than most, right?
Right.
So, the other trailer that came out in the fantasy realm, which is worth pointing out, is the Dark Crystal Comic-Con sneak peek trailer. So
I'm really excited for this one.
Me too. This looks really cool. They did a really nice behind the scenes look, which is about the appreciation for the artistry and the fact that like everything that they could do in this movie that's handmade is handmade. So like large format matte paintings, the puppets, the backgrounds, the sets.
Hmm.
Like there's a lot of stuff that's real, and the whole idea is to kind of make the viewer forget that they're watching puppetry. But they're also not ignoring the fact that they've got green screens, and like if they want to do some of the stuff with a character as a marionette, they can then like edit out the strings, and like they can do some stuff that's really going to sell it. For me, the wide shots look great. I thought the compositions look great. I love the fact that it's not all CG. It's like we only are going to use CG for the one thing that we can't do, which is operate a puppet at 60 miles an hour. Like we're going to have
Which
to.
is
Yeah.
so nice because I find that most people use CG as a crutch.
Yes,
For a
exactly.
lot of
Like
stuff. It's a
when you
very expensive crutch.
yeah, well, like when you see these shots, it's like the matte painting is there, the giant tree and the ball that the Gelfling is hanging on is there. It's a real prop. Of course, the puppet is a real thing. The only thing that's CG'd, and they show you the wipe, is they CG in the ground moving underneath them as like to show the speed, right? That's the only
Right.
thing. Everything else is all really static, which I thought was really really cool. Or I shouldn't say static. It's a real prop, like it's a real physical
Right.
thing in the environment. So that's going to have
Tactile.
real lighting, real interaction. You don't have to fake all that kind of stuff. I'm cautiously optimistic because the one thing they continuously avoid to show in any of these trailers are the puppets talking. There's a lot of wipes. There's a lot of mouths moving behind crowds. There's a lot of voiceover that's happening, and then they cut to an action scene. But they very, very seldomly actually show a puppet that's not a creature making a sound. So I don't know if the Gelflings, hand puppet mouth movements are going to feel very dated by the time this comes out. It's one of those things where like I wouldn't be opposed to maybe, some CG if it felt a little bit better. At the same time, I can appreciate the fact that they want to kind of stay true to its roots. I don't quite know if it's going to hold up in that way. I would be very happy to be wrong. I'd be more than happy to be wrong because it looks beautiful. Like it just going into it, if you think about it, like, look, this is not going to look like state of the art. It's meant to be an elaborate puppet show. And if you think about it
Right.
that way, I think if you set those expectations, I think it'll be very good. I am, of course, going to be watching it for just as much as the art and the expression and the imagination of it as I am the quality of the writing and stuff like that. And ultimately, like I watch some pretty basic, computer generated animated shows on Netflix, and that's the story that keeps me watching. I'm not necessarily blown away every week by the visuals. So if the Dark Crystal, which is Age of Resistance, I think is the name of it.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, if the writing is good, then I will be on board. What did you like? Obviously, you watched the original film. You've seen that.
Yeah.
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 Is it something that you grew up with? Like, is it like, it has a big nostalgia pang for you?
Um, well, it bypassed me, and then I was hanging out with a friend, and they were just like talking about all the different fantasy movies that they were into, and I'm like, oh, what's a Dark Crystal? And they showed it to me because it was like around the same time as Labyrinth,
Yes. Yeah.
and I liked Labyrinth. So like, oh, if you like Labyrinth, you'll love this. So I watched it. It kind of freaked me out a little bit as a kid. I think it was like maybe 13 or 12. I think it was like about 12
Yeah.
when I first watched it, and I was like, well, okay, this is kind of creepy, but it always left a really strong impression on me in a positive way.
It's a good
Even though
underdog
it kind of,
story, right?
yeah, it is. Yeah, it is a really good underdog story, and it looked beautiful. Like the culture and like each race and each character had its very distinct style, which was really cool. And I don't know, anything fantasy that's very visionary like that. I think has always really attracted me because it's like this just someone just made this up. This doesn't exist anywhere.
Yeah.
So this just came out of your brain. And I was like, that's really cool. I'm really into that.
Yeah. And
Like
that's
Lord of the Rings is always something like that for me as well. Like, yes, it's a high fantasy thing, but like each race has its own culture and its own you know, history and architecture and food and music and
yeah.
things like that. Like that's stuff that's really, really cool to me in terms of world building.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did watch it. It's on Netflix, I think. The Dark Crystal.
Oh, the movie, yes, it
The
is. Yeah,
original.
yeah,
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 the
it is.
original.
In anticipation of this coming out in August, the series coming out in August, they've had both Labyrinth and the Dark Crystal have been up on Netflix for a
Nice.
little while. Yeah, no, it's very cool. I'm getting a lot of '80s nostalgia pangs as of like Stranger Things, Dark Crystal. I don't normally like 80s stuff. Like it's not a realm that I particularly just like. The music is weird. The pop culture was pretty cheesy. Like it's not my favorite thing. I don't really like the 90s either. Like I prefer like in terms of music and when I think of like classic nostalgic stuff, it's usually like 70s rock
Mm.
and stuff like that. Every once in a while, there's a good '80s like hair band, like Guns N' Roses or something, or heavy. I guess they were heavy metal, although they wouldn't really be heavy by today's standards. But like
No.
stuff like that, sure, there's some diamonds in the rough. I'm not saying all of the '80s was a blanket snore, but I don't normally think about like the neon, corny like mall '80s that they highlighted in Stranger Things as like my favorite thing about the era.
Right.
But there are some things like the Dark Crystal, Neverending Story,
Yeah.
like
Oh, never-ending story.
right, like there's some stuff like that that really kind of brings back some nostalgia, and I think part of it is like it's the cheesy, not cheesy, it's the synthetic symphonic soundtracks, and they play some of
Yeah.
it in this Dark Crystal trailer, and it really reminds me of like when synthesizers were all the rage, and so they started to make their way into movies that were scored, but they had like these symphony and these synthesizers in there as
Synthwave.
well. Synthwave, yeah, like it was really really cool stuff, and so it does kind of remind me a little bit of my childhood and some other
See,
similar kind
I
of movies.
love 80s synthwave. I
Okay.
love 80s pop. I love like man Duran Duran. Ugh,
Yeah,
I'm
no.
so into it. Like I don't know what it is. I think it's just because it's so absurd. It's
Yeah.
so over the top, and I think that's what I like about it.
So much of it
Uh,
was overplayed on local radio stations when I was a kid. Like
oh,
every,
that's like with now though too,
yeah. Well,
right?
I don't listen to the radio. I haven't for years on
Oh
purpose.
yeah, I haven't really
But
either.
I feel like every time I hear '80s radio stuff, I just always think about being stuck in the car shopping on a rainy Saturday with my mom because I was too young to stay at home and play Nintendo by myself. Like
Mm-hmm.
age 13, 14, whatever kid, you can stay home. Okay, thanks, bye. Unless you need me to come with you for like school supplies or clothes or something like that, I do not want to go to the mall.
Yeah.
And but when you're 10, you have to go. So you've got to go
Yeah.
grocery shopping and you've got to go to the mall and you got to go to the plumbing store and the car is always too hot. Like I have no fond memories of any of that. So all the 80s music, it was just always the same stuff on C100, which was the radio station that we listened to. It was just always on all the time. Um, Speaking of nostalgia, though, and to end on a positive note, I'm going to throw in the internet minute here. No, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. There's just so much to talk about this week that I've just.
There's so much to talk about. I
It's
looked at
hard.
the show notes today and I was just like, wow, that's a lot of
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly. Just I was gonna get ahead of myself, but now I'm gonna have to backtrack, and it's all over the place now. So this is how the sausage is made, folks. Uh, Top Gun Maverick. The trailer was dropped at Comic Con. Kind of an odd place to drop it, but I
Yeah.
guess I mean it is at San Diego. I guess it's because the original was filmed in San Diego, so or a good chunk of it was. So I guess that's the nostalgia there or the reason for it because it's not really a comic book movie or sci-fi or fantasy or any of the things that you generally associate with Comic Con. Outside of the fact that everybody at Comic Con would probably be the kind of audience that you'd be looking for, but it's one of those sequels that has been long enough that I feel like it could be very interesting to see where they've gone with the characters.
Hmm.
And the trailer, again, same as the Picard trailer, just hits all the right notes. It starts off pretty slow. There's a conversation with I said it's Ed Norton. It's not. It's Ed Harris. I think is the actor that's in the. I mistyped this in the notes. It's Ed Harris. Talking to Maverick, saying like, so you've been at this for something, like forever. How the heck are you not like a 2-star admiral? Why are you still a captain? Why is that? And then of course it cuts to all the different trailer parts, and it stars Val Kilmer. Jennifer Connelly is in it. I actually didn't even recognize her when they scrolled past her quickly in the trailer. I was surprised when I saw her on IMDb. And John Hamm is in it as well, and I really like John Hamm. He's one of my favorite actors. I imagine John Hamm is also pretty stoked. I mean, I know everybody in it is a film star and television star in their own right, but John Hamm was 15 when the 1986 original Top Gun came out, and now he's in Top Gun. I can imagine he's probably pretty stoked.
Yeah.
Like
yeah, I'd imagine.
You know, like that's pretty cool. John Hamm is only I think he's only about 8 years older than I am. So much closer to my age than anybody else in the film, except for I don't know how old Jennifer Connelly is, but I think Jennifer Connelly and I are actually closer to the same age. But John Hamm is close compared to like Tom Cruise, who's in his 50s, and Val Kilmer, same thing. So yeah, I when I saw him in the trailer, I was like, oh, that's awesome, good actor. And then my brain just immediately went to like, he is probably so excited to be in this film. Like it looks so good. And in the announcement, Cruise was on stage and he mentioned that I believe he says all of the shots were of real aircraft. I'm assuming he means all of the in-cockpit shots. Because some of the stuff that's in this trailer, I doubt very much that they're risking multi-million-dollar aircraft to make a film.
Right.
In some of these stunts that they were pulling off. I could be wrong, but I would imagine that he meant the in-cockpit stuff, which looks phenomenal. Like, this is the kind of thing where, like, I am going to go see it in IMAX, and it is going to be ludicrous. I'm really looking forward to it. And I like the original. I'm not really the biggest Tom Cruise fan, but Top Gun has just always been one of my favorite movies from growing up. And like I said, for whatever reason, I think they waited long enough that this is going to get a huge response from people. Are you a Top Gun? Are you a Top Gun kid? Like, did you grow up with it?
Not really. No, it was like, I think just the subject matter, my mom didn't really want me watching.
Right.
A lot of guns.
Yeah, a lot of guns.
A lot of action, like anything
Action
like
stuff.
Mission Impossible and stuff. Like now, like I'm sure if I were to go back and try and watch it, I would be really into it. I might try and watch it. I never really got into it. I think mostly it just missed me.
Mm-hmm.
But I might seek that out and take a look at it.
Cool. There's some good 80s music in it.
Man, okay, well, I'm down. I'm in. I'm on board. I love 80s music.
It's one of those movies from the 80s that doesn't scream 80s, right? With the exception of some of the soundtrack choices, which are just products of their time, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's no different than having an R&B song in a movie right now, right?
Right.
Like,
I watched a movie recently. Sorry, I just derailed this entirely, but I watched, like, you were just talking about like how it's a product of its time.
mm-hmm.
I watched a movie recently that I distinctly remember being in the 2000s, and for whatever reason I'm just like, oh yeah, iPhones are in the 2000s. Yeah, sure. But it was just everyone just had flip phones, and I was like, what? Like, it's just like a complete like mental take back. I'm like, right, it was like, what was it? It was like called Maid of Honor or something.
Right.
And it was like before iPhones, I think, were really common, so everyone had like little flip phones, and I was like, and people were like texting by hitting like multiple letters at a time, and I was like, what do you mean? Sorry. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, no,
Totally
it's one of the reasons why Stranger Things works so well, because that whole show starts to get really complicated and falls apart if every kid in that series has a cell phone, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to get to the phone that's attached to the wall in 1984 to communicate with anybody. It creates some real peril, right?
Mm-hmm.
Joyce and Hopper have no idea where the kids are or if they're okay because they can't text them and ask them, right? So it creates some panic for the characters, which I think really works. It's kind of.
I mean, I'm sure you could like write in like a cell tower going down or something. It's like, oh, the cell tower.
Yes, yeah, you could do that.
Right?
You know, like, well, because there's like an electromagnetic pulse that goes off with the monster, and like there's all kinds of different things that could certainly be happening. But like part of I think the benefit of writing it for the 80s for Stranger Things is that it does get rid of a lot of the more modern communication things that get really complicated. And I think too that it can also be a crutch if you have that kind of stuff where like maybe it's part of the plot and it's essential that you have like texting and cell phone and all this kind of stuff. But I find that it's a delicate line to walk. Like I've seen some romantic comedies that use it very well, where they'll pop the texts up on the screen to show you a fun little kind of like, hey, these two characters are texting back and forth just like you would with anybody that you're dating, and it's
Yeah.
funny because you can have some timing and you can have some spelling and you can have an autocorrect joke and like there's all these different things that you can work in there. But then other times there's situations where you're aware that cell phones are in the film and that people are using them, but then you're just like, all of this could really be solved if someone just picked up the phone and called somebody. Like it's hard if the plot requires non-communication and the film has already been set up to have like communication everywhere, communication overload.
Right.
You know, that kind of
Right.
stuff I find really, really interesting. They handled it better back when like the internet was first becoming a thing. Like you've got Mail, another great, rom-com with Tom Hanks. Like that works because at the time there was still that stigma around like online dating and internet chat rooms and things like that. Whereas these days it would just be laughable in terms of like these two characters being so hesitant about online communication and stuff. Like I don't know. It's one of those things that does. There was this fun little niche, this fun little pigeonhole in the development of all that technology that really allowed for some movies that could use it to their advantage. But I find that now I'm more inclined to watch period pieces because it just erases all of that complication and just it gets right back down to the brass tacks of like these two people have to talk to one another in person to get their feelings or to communicate the information. That sort of stuff is really cool. But I think that's going to be the end of our Comic-Con talk at the risk of recording for like 2 hours.
There's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, but it was fun. It was fun to just kind of get a lot out there and talk about all kinds of really cool, nerdy things that I'm excited about. I do find that sometimes on the show I tend to come down on stuff that I'm watching because I'm really picky. So it's nice to have some positive stuff to look forward to. You can look forward to me picking it apart later.
There you go.
But that brings us into the Internet Minute, which is brought to you by you. If you are a patron and you're like, what's a patron? That's how this show is made. If you go to patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe, you can see that there are currently 20 people supporting the podcast. And you're like, 20? That doesn't sound like a lot. You're right. It isn't. You should probably join because it helps me produce the show. It helps me take the time to edit, post, to do the research, all that kind of stuff. And in addition to just helping me do this show and help my other co-hosts and stuff, you also get to join the Discord. This is a community-only chat server, so there's just the people from the Citadel Cafe as well as my own personal Patreon for my artwork in this chat room. It's a fun, tight little community. We talk about nerdy stuff all the time. There's Lego, there's food, recipe sharing, there's of course movies and stuff, some video games. It is mostly Minecraft, but there are some other games that come up from time to time. But it's a really, really fun place to hang out during the week if you like talking about this kind of nerdy stuff. I'm assuming you do if you're listening to the Citadel Cafe. So head on over to patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe. Take a look at some of the tiers, decide on if you'd like to help us out and where you'd like to help us out. And then just join. If you have any questions, then just write me at thecitadelcafe@gmail.com and I will be happy to answer them. But the pick this week is, speaking of Tom Hanks, a movie trailer. Imagine that. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. The trailer dropped. Surprisingly not at Comic-Con at the same time as Comic-Con, but I don't think it was actually launched at Comic-Con. Tom Hanks is starring as Fred Rogers from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, the biopic behind the children's television icon, and it follows the real life that Rogers had with real-life journalist Tom Junod. I think that's how you pronounce his name. It looks really good. I have already said that I'm a Tom Hanks fan. Have you seen the trailer?
No, I haven't yet.
So,
but I'm gonna love it anyway. It's Tom Hanks.
I mean, did you grow up with Mr. Rogers?
I did, yes. The Mr. Rogers was a huge thing in my childhood. It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood.
Yeah,
it was like that was that and Mr. Dressup.
Mr. Dressup was huge for me too.
Yeah,
huge for me too. Mr. Dressup, I think, is more for Canadians, so our American listeners might be like, "What? Who are you talking about?" But Mr. Dressup and Fred Penner were two big Canadian children's television stars. Mr. Dressup is one of the reasons that I draw. I'm an artist because he used to sit. Yeah, he used to sit at his drafting table and draw cartoons and stuff live on camera with like Sharpie markers. It was crazy. I learned
Oh,
later.
yes, I remember that.
Yeah, I learned later that he had a drawing that he had done underneath it so that he could trace it. So he didn't make any mistakes on camera. So it was a
Ah,
little,
okay.
little bit of a bubble pop. But like when I was 5, you're just like, how is he doing this? It was really interesting. But the movie looks like a really good nod to an American television icon and someone that did an awful lot for PBS in the States. So I'd be very, very curious to watch this movie. Hanks is the right age for it. He's obviously a phenomenal actor. It seems to have a very measured pace. Like I would imagine, because I've seen some old footage of interviews with Fred Rogers, and he did speak slowly, not in a bad way, just in a very measured way, a very gentle
Yeah.
way, and I feel like some of that is coming out in the trailer, and because that's the mood I think that they want to communicate. So I'm very curious. I don't know if I'm going to rush out to see it in the theaters, but it's definitely going to be on my watch list for like a chill evening at home, watching a biopic. That is going to be it for this episode of the Citadel Cafe. You can find out more. You can find the links to all the different stuff that Megan and I talked about today at thecitadelcafe.com. You can email the show at thecitadelcafe@gmail.com. Find us by name on Twitter and Facebook. Subscribe on iTunes, Android, Stitcher, or Spotify. And of course, spread the word by just telling your friends and saying, hey, this is a good show. You should probably go listen to it. I would very much appreciate it. You can find me at joelduggan.com. If you're interested in hiring me for doing some illustration and design, then just drop me a line there. You can also check out my other podcast about Minecraft at thespawnchunks.com. And I am going to point you towards Twitch, which is twitch.tv/joelduggan. That is where I do some live art streaming. And also, now that the heat wave is over, I'm going to be back into streaming some Minecraft. Megan, where can people find you online?
People can find me online on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Megan Townsend. And if you wanted to follow my personal project, The Heir of Caldanan, that is also on Instagram too.
You've been listening to the Citadel Cafe, where we are fast, easy, and cheap, but you can only pick 2.